Hello, everybody. Today I'm joined by two gentlemen from Canada and Triton Noir. It is Thibaud and Manuel,
Hello.
and we're going to do a bit of a catch-up about an upcoming Kickstarter that's revisiting an old property. But first, gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. I think the first thing I should really ask is who are you guys and what do you do at Triton Noir?
So I'm Thibaud. I founded Triton Noir a few years ago, 6 years ago, and I also design V-Commandos and Assassin's Creed Brotherhood of Venice. So, and I have a video game developer background for about 20 years in video game development, and then I switched to board games. So this is it for me.
So I'm Manuel. I'm the art director for the miniatures and illustration for Triton Noir. And beside that, I'm also the creative director for Sculpting, who's a board game company, another board game company. I've been interested in miniature for years and years. And I've been working with a lot of people like Asmodee. I've been working on a very little miniature game called Alchemy back in the time. And I was a miniature painter when I had good eyes. So I was waiting. It was very cool when I met Thibaud, and he asked me if I wanted to join him to work on miniatures with Triton Noir, because it's a passion for me. Every ball game, of course.
That's interesting, because you've come from what we would often term a more traditional tabletop background. When you're working together, having come from that sort of computer game industry, is there much difference when you're attempting to get a game together? Or do you approach it in a similar way that you would plan out a digital game, Thibaud?
It's many things for me are the same. And of course, you have differences. It's more easy to have a digital game and to patch it, for example. It became a bad habit, I think, in the video game industry. But I mean, the being focused on the player for me is very important. Playtest also, of course. Playtests are very, very evolved and developed in the video game industry, and I would like to develop it more for us. But for me, it's really similar in terms of vision and the way I think I work. So yeah, for me there are many things that could be shared and many things that should be shared. A thing I often say is, for example, when you create levels for V-Commandos in particular, but also for Assassin's Creed, I really try to. We have many levels in both games. We have about 50 different levels in both games, and I try to work each of them to be different from the others, tweaking a few rules, adding a new character or something different to be sure that it's always refreshing when you play a new map. And this is, for example, some things that, in my opinion, was missing in some scenario games, where often you just enter, kill all the monsters, and then get out, if I summarize. And yes, I really wanted to take, in the video game, you have level designers, and their job is just to create the levels using the tools created by all of the team. But their job is to make each level interesting and different. And this is something, for example, I really try to keep developing board games, for example.
That is interesting, because you do often see, especially with some, I'm going to use the phrase dungeon crawler as a catch-all, because it's similar with tile placement and miniatures moving on it. But once they have the mechanics down, the scenarios are just the same mechanics repeated throughout the various levels and scenarios, and all you're doing is changing the map that people are moving on and adding or subtracting tiles, or adding and subtracting opponents, and you're not actually changing up mechanically how the game plays. So it's interesting that you've taken that sort of concept that within a game they don't all have to play exactly the same. Every scenario is not just repetitious.
Yeah.
So talking about Assassin's Creed, that is a game that is recently it was on pre-order. Is it? You're saying it's about to go back onto pre-order, is it?
Yes, in a few weeks. We are working on it's a new website that we developed a few months ago, and we still have to adjust and tweak a few things for the UK in particular. So currently we will not be able to deliver to the UK with the pre-orders when we will open the store probably, but we will try. We are working on a solution with a partner to be able to ship to the UK. Of course, the backers from the original campaigns and who pre-order the game before that will get their games. But when we will reopen the pre-orders in a few weeks, it will probably not be possible to pre-order from the UK. We hope to have a solution quickly, but for the moment, this is the status.
Well, this is an interesting one because the first game you released 5 years ago now, V-Commandos, which we'll talk about more later, was a board game with no miniatures. And I remember seeing a very early review by, I think it was Sam Healy at the Dice Tower, where he said if it had had miniatures, it just would have been the icing on the cake. So you've come back years later and with Assassin's Creed and added miniatures in, and the miniature sculpts look absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
So with V-Commandos, I suppose not to bury the lead any longer, with V-Commandos then, is this something you're intending to do across the board? Is it going to be a whole new game with miniatures, or are you adding to the existing game? How are you planning on taking it forward?
Maybe just before that, I wanted to say that we originally planned to have miniatures for V-Commandos at the beginning, and we changed our mind because it was our first game, and we thought it wouldn't be reasonable to go with such a big project for a first game. So we switched for token early in the process. It was a difficult decision because we also knew that we would have much less backers even at the time. So yes, the plan today is to add miniature packs to upgrade your game, in fact. So V-Commandos remain V-Commandos, and same thing for the two expansions, Resistance and Secret Weapons. But now you can add many new visual assets, the minis, of course. We have also a totally new set of tiles, thematic tiles for each objectives, because many people were complaining because they wanted to have a specific tile. If you have to destroy planes, you want to see a tile with planes. So we created all these tiles. It's about 50 new tiles for the base game and expansions. And maybe forgetting things, but I think it's the most important updates for the game. And we will also create a third, another box, which will be an expansion with new gameplay that you can adapt and play with all existing operations and levels created yet. So you have an XP mode, XP, yeah. So you can see on these cards, you have new events, of course, new tokens, because this expansion can be played with tokens only. So you can, if you don't want minis, you can just get this expansion, get the new gameplay without needing the minis. And yes, you have a solo mode, but allowing you to play with only one commando, because V-Commando is very popular for solitaire gamers today, but we wanted to create a mode where you can only play one commando. You have a campaign mode that allows you to chain several operations, so you can play for hours because we have many operations in V-Commandos. And the last one is the XP that allow you to get XP cards with new abilities for your character when you progress in the game.
You can progress and level up throughout the campaign.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So this is sorry, this is one of the things. If people haven't seen V-Commandos being played, the bottom two cards are essentially scenarios showing how the tiles are laid out, and then the card on the left is a linked campaign series. So that Bocage Normandy is actually just the second or possibly third in what could be a 6 scenario miniature campaign. So these can be all linked together, and I don't see it on that card, but I know the scenario cards give a sort of a suggested time for how long it takes to play through. So you can see that a game will take you 2 hours, or a scenario would take half an hour, and you can work out what scenarios you could sort of play through depending on how much time you have available to you.
Yes, this is it. And you can see that this operation, Ghost, is the biggest one. So you have 7 levels to play. So it's you can, maybe it will be something like 4 hours or something like that. Of course, you can split, because V-Commandos is structured as you play different levels, and then you dismantle them and set up the next one and continue to play. So you can pause the game easily during your campaign, and I think this is one of the cool things in the game. In fact, it's multiple short game sessions, which are about 45 minutes, I would say.
Superb. So do you want to talk us through roughly the gameplay and the idea of how V-Commandos plays out on the tabletop? We've seen the sort of the scenario cards, but what sort of a game is it? Because when people see these World War II style or well, any style of board game like this, they assume it's like the Dirty Dozen. You go in, guns blazing, and stack up the kills as quickly as you can to complete the mission. But that's really not what you've gone for with V-Commandos, is it?
No, we really wanted to stick to the commando spirit, which was more stealthy, and also surprising the enemy. So you try to go as stealthy as long as you can on each level. Use equipment. You have silent equipment, stealthy weapons, silent weapons, and yes, it's not. Most of the time you will trigger the alarm, but it's possible not to trigger it. I mean, if you play really well and if you're lucky enough, you can also, and if you have the good equipment, the right combination of commandos, you can really do a map entirely silent, but it's difficult. And it's, in my opinion, it makes the game more tactical, because you really have to plan and pay attention to what's the best way, what the best equipment should we use to and not just shooting and clearing the path. So it makes it, I think, very different from many dungeon crawlers on the market.
Yeah, one of the things that struck me, where in our little clique at OnTableTop, we're very interested in the raid on Saint-Nazaire. And this is something that Warren has talked at length about trying to build a game on. And when he talks about building it, he wants to play more like a board game with a stealth aspect and no measurements, moving from section to section on a map built like Saint-Nazaire, following that commando raid where there are specific things to do. And in V-Commandos, that is pretty much what you have. You have a scenario where there's a specific objective, or maybe multiple objectives that are all being pulled together, and you have to decide what members of your commando team are going to do what objective, whether it's setting the charges or covering the escape or knocking out a guard, and all these things, all under the constant threat of suddenly alerting all of the Germans to come running. And I think that is what impressed me the most when I looked at V-Commandos. It's that mechanic of how stealthy can you be. It's not the body count you can rack up, because if you try and go in all guns blazing, chances are things will go very badly wrong for the mission as a whole. And it plays out more like you imagine these specific raids and sabotage missions were actually planned. It's not we'll kill everybody who comes towards us. You have to put thought and effort into it, and even the order in which you activate your various commandos can be the difference between winning and losing a game, simply by maybe activating somebody in the wrong order, because you have those options within the game to pick and choose the order of activation every turn. And that, I think, is really engaging for players, is to always have those discussions, because it's a cooperative game or a solo game. You're always against the AI. So having that sort of baked in means that people are always sitting around and deciding how they're going to go about it.
Yeah, and when I was in conventions and different people coming to play and test the game, if they didn't really discuss, talk together, plan the thing, they failed. So it's really a game when you need to discuss and make the plan together. And it's also a game that has so many tactical possibilities that you really need to talk. And it's difficult. I think it's difficult to have a leader, or maybe if this leader knows the game perfectly, maybe he can be a leader. But even in conventions, even when I suggested options for the players, sometimes a player came and tell, but if we do this way, maybe it's better. And I said, yeah, you're right. So it's interesting, because sometimes you have the alpha player, or and I think for this kind of game, there are so many options that it's interesting to listen to everyone, and everyone can come with an interesting solution.
So you're moving back then to return to V-Commandos, which had a fantastic launch. You've got the main game and then 2 expansions. This time you're revisiting it with miniatures. So I suppose the first thing we should do is talk about the miniatures, because I know people are wondering why I haven't shown any yet, and it's just because I like to tease them and make them watch. But the range of miniatures map those original artwork beautifully well. I mean, they're absolutely superb. So you said you originally wanted the miniatures, and I suppose the first thing is, when you're revisiting a game like V-Commandos and you decide to bring the miniatures in, does that mean we're going to get all new sets with the miniatures in each one, or is it going to be combined? Are we going to get those expansions rolled into the main sort of game? What sort of plans have you to introduce people to the miniatures?
In fact, I'm not sure I understood the question.
Sorry,
excuse me.
There's the 3 boxes at the moment,
yeah.
the core game and the 2 expansions.
Okay.
So will there be the options to get the miniatures separately, or will the miniatures come like Assassin's Creed, all in a combined box, or how are you planning to introduce them? So
it's really, in fact, we'll have 2 boxes. With miniatures. So the first one will be for the base game only. So it's as I said, it's it's a pack, miniature pack for the base game, and the second one will be a miniature pack for the 2 expansions, Secret Weapons and Resistance. We had to group them, because if we didn't do that, many miniatures would be in double, but you wouldn't need them in double.
Right.
So, for example, you have some enemies with gas mask, and they are in both expansions. So if we had done 2 separate boxes, you would have this problem, and for other minis too. So 1 box for the core box and 1 box for the 2 expansions. And as I said, it's just it's many visual upgrades for the game. We also have many new illustrations for all the commandos. So all the cards have been redesigned with the new art, and the minis have been created according to this new art also.
That's good news for people who already have the game, then, that they're going to be able to pick up the miniatures separately. And I imagine quite a few people will be looking to pick up these miniatures anyway, because they are absolutely stunning. I was fortunate enough to be sent a few of the resin prototypes, and Stefan has done superb work from several companies. I've seen his work in the past. He does very I suppose, realistic sculpts. They're not over the top. Sometimes you see these models and they look cartoonish, whereas even though these have a somewhat fictional basis, they look absolutely superb. With the likes of the miniatures, you're going to go back to Kickstarter to launch these, or is this going to be a supplemental launch?
It will be a crowdfunding campaign. We are still discussing about which platform we will use.
Right.
Okay. But yes, it will be a Kickstarter campaign. But maybe I think Manuel could talk about Stefan and the work on the minis.
Sure.
Because
it was, as you said, it's more realistic than most miniatures that you can see out there, but it still have a feel of comic book style, and that's why when we choose to redesign the characters for the miniatures, we ask Ronan Touloa to do the concepts, because he's a French comic book drawer, illustrator.
Right.
So he had this loose manner of working, very as he come from the comic book. He's used to work on the character and draw very quickly, and it has this comic book artistic style that we wanted, because we are somewhere in the middle between the historical realistic look and something more this comic book traits that was already present in the first V-Commando game. So it was very important for us to work with someone who could draw the characters, recreate the characters with this constraint, this kind of in-between worlds.
Yeah.
And so the concepts were very, very important. And after that, Stefan did a really good job he understood that it had to be realistic. It was an historical game, but at the same time, all the characters had a lot of personality, and he worked a lot on the faces. So often first he sent us rough positioning for the characters, so we could validate the proportion and the position, the pose of the miniature. But after that, the first thing that was already finished when he sent us the 3D steps was the faces. So he worked a lot. If you have if you see the character with the grenades or the butcher, you can tell that he had a lot of work to put all the personality that Ronan created for these characters and put that into miniatures. And also the big difficulty for that is that miniatures are very small, so you have to exaggerate everything. It's hard to keep something that is beautiful and nice looking and that is exaggerated so you can see, because like these are version, when you see these images, they are maybe 5 or 10 times bigger than the real miniature that you will have on the table. So it has to look nice when you see them like that. And it's even more important than the poses and the faces are expressive enough so that you can recognize them and see them when they are on the table when you play with them.
Yeah, and the miniatures, which are probably up on screen now if my editor's listening to me, miniatures are about 32 mil for people who like to keep tabs on things like that. So they are, while realistic proportion, they're larger than the sort of, I was going to say the standard, but the standard creeps up in scale over the years. So 32 mil is fast becoming the standard in tabletop miniatures. So for painters, there's certainly a wealth of detail that they can get into. But at the same time, if people are just interested in playing the board game and aren't as keen on actually painting the miniatures, there's enough fine detail on it that even simple painting techniques will really highlight those details for them, which means they should be a boon to both the artistic type and both the hobbyist, I think is the way to put it, that just get the colors into the right place and they'll come up a treat. I'll be very impressed to see, very keen to see how the actual final miniatures come out, because while these are resin, you're going to be producing in plastic, presumably, for the board game.
The plastic we use for the production is very, very close to the resin look. We now have the miniatures from Assassin's Creed, and sometimes it's hard to recognize the resin prototypes and the final plastic miniatures. We have to see, oh yeah, that on the feather, it's not the same feather exactly. So this one is the plastic one. And we were really impressed because Assassin's Creed miniatures have a lot of very, very fine details. And sometimes we were worried it will not be exactly like that on the miniature, and everything is there. So for V-Commando, it will be the same. The resin miniatures you have there should be very, very close to the final look of the miniatures.
I think that will be not only fascinating for gamers of the actual V-Commandos board game, but like I say, I think an awful lot of people will be picking these up for just gaming in general, because finding things like SOE operatives, saboteurs, and spies for tabletop games is very, very difficult to do, and I'm quite happy to hear that they will be available as an additional box. Essentially, people will be able to get them relatively easily without having to jump through a lot of hoops, because I've seen the concept art for the I assume it's the spy in the German uniform with the silenced pistol under the case, and that's just a joy right there, because it is so rare that you see such a narrative miniature on the tabletop. So I think that's going to be fantastic.
And they do respect the historical look of the characters or the weapons and such, so you can use them for a lot of historical games, compared to, for example, the Reichbusters miniature, where they are very, very lovely, but they are more heroic and more fantasy. And the approach for V-Commando is more close to the historical real look and standard, with this little comic book feel.
Yeah, it's more of a cartoon sketch of World War II rather than a Wolfenstein-like over-the-top weird World War feel to it. Do you have plans then, if the campaign is successful, to push beyond the existing game, I suppose, the existing two campaigns and the main core box? Do you have plans to expand and open up and maybe add some more campaigns to V-Commandos?
We would love to, but I mean, that will also depend on this campaign. The success. We have absolutely no idea about how many new gamers will join the community because of the minis. Currently, we sold about 10,000 V-Commandos copies, which is, I think, great for a game like that. But because it's not, I mean, a casual game. But we expect, we are really impatient to see what the minis if the minis will change something or not for the game. But then, yes, I think it will depend on this campaign. So, but we would love to. We have many ideas in our heads to continue to work on V-Commandos. Yes.
Yeah, I think it will be fantastic to see, and it's one of these things where the fact that you didn't have miniatures at the initial launch and the game was still very successful is a fitting tribute to the quality of the game. And there's always that group of players who like to see the shiny plastic miniature on the table, and if they don't see that, then they somehow feel that the game is lacking in some way, even though it's got everything it needs to have. So yeah, having the miniatures in there to lure people in, I think, is an ideal way of doing it, because we are, at the end of the day, fickle people. It's a sign of the times, I suppose. So, gentlemen, is there anything else we haven't covered or that you want to cover?
Maybe I would like to talk a little bit about the production aspect of the miniature.
Certainly.
Because I wanted to tell we worked with Benjamin Maillet as a production consultant, and it's something that no one will really see in the work we have done there. When you see the miniatures, you don't know that this person is working with us. You just see the concept and the sculptor work. But it was important for us to have someone who knows very, very well the production, the plastic production capacity of the factories and such. And if you go in a project like that without knowing how they will be produced, without knowing all the steps and the process, you will end up with miniatures that will be very different from at the end.
Sure.
Because and it's something that's transparent, you won't see it, but all these miniatures have a professional that has worked with the sculptor and checked every detail, the size of the detail, the depth of the detail, and how the pieces will go in the mold, and so all this work is something that is very, very important, and people don't know that that it is done. So I just wanted to tell that, and to thanks Benjamin for working with us, because his help is invaluable.
Yeah, and this also guarantees that what you see on the screen, for example, the miniatures you showed, which are 3D renders, will really be close to the final result. Will really be close to that. I mean,
there are always surprises and little details that will change, but mostly it will be like that. And change, you won't, if you don't check the original 3D render and the miniature very closely, you will probably never
be unable to tell that it's even been changed. Yeah, like I say, the resin prototypes I've had a look at are absolutely superb, and it's one of those, I suppose, thankless jobs that gets done in the background, and because it's not the painted box art or the mechanics of the game, it often gets overlooked. But the actual production is, in many respects, as important, because I've known games in the past where the final production was such a large letdown. I won't mention what game it was in particular, but it more or less destroyed the game once the Kickstarter backers had received it, and it never really got a retail release, and it was dead in the water. And it was just such a simple thing that they didn't realize how the production would be handled to get these fantastic renders and sculpts actually into the hands of the players and the painters in the same quality that they'd initially been concepted. So yeah, it's very well said.
It's a very long process, and like you said, sometimes you have a Kickstarter who sell dream, and
yes.
Yeah, the render are gorgeous and with little textures and a lot of very fine details, but it's not worth it if it's not on the miniature at the end. So we do prefer to have something that maybe it's a little bit simpler, but that will be exactly what you will have. We don't cheat on the render.
And we also always focus on quality on all qualities on every aspect of the game, but it is an example for the minis. We really want, because for V-Commandos, for Assassin's Creed, we worked with many sculptors. I think 6 or 7 different sculptors for the game, and some of them were some of the best in the world. So, I mean, when we are lucky enough to work with these people, you really want to be sure that their work will be in the end of the gamers will be really super high quality, and we are really happy with all the process we currently have, and the manufacturer also, which does an incredible quality for the minis. So yeah, nice.
Yeah, exciting times ahead. Gentlemen, it's fantastic. Hopefully I will get a chance to speak to you again. I do look forward to seeing this, I suppose, revamp of V-Commandos, hopefully coming soon, so people will be able to get their hands on it. If anybody has any questions, if they want to pop them into the comments below, I shall do my best to get them answered by hook or by crook, and we'll be keeping a close eye on Assassin's Creed and V-Commandos in the coming years, hopefully. I will speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.